Thanks for joining us for the user group. We have some fun sessions coming up. But first of all, before I hand over to Nick, I'd like to thank Sagittarius for offering to sponsor the event and also the community. So we have Peter and Nick and also Nat and Peter, Clisby speaking. I think this is the first time that I didn't have to actually bother people and try and find speakers because this time people came to us. So that was a very nice change. So if anyone has any talks that they want to do later on, please reach out to myself or Alex Washtel or Jeremy Davis or any one of those, and we'll make sure that that happens in a future event. So I know that I put on the website that we would do a Kahoot quiz, which we are not going to do. We are going to do a quiz. It's just not going to be on Kahoot. So no need to download Kahoot anymore. If you already have, apologies. We'll run the quiz through a different system, which we can just use our browser to join, whether that's on a mobile device or on the device that you're on right now. With that said, Nick, I'll hand over to you.
Great, thanks, Johannes. Thanks everyone for coming. It's a great event. Good to see so many people from Sagittarius, but good to see so many faces from outside of Sagittarius, because I get sick of looking at our lot on screen every day, I can tell you, these little tiny tiles that we all live in. Just a little bit about Sag. I know we're not supposed to plug too much, but I thought it was worth saying. We are one of the UK's leading independent Sitecore agencies. There's about 70 of us. There are 3 MVPs in our mix, one of which you're going to hear from tonight in Natalie, a strategy MVP. And we're really excited about all the stuff that's going on in the Sitecore community and in the Sitecore world with all the new product launches. I think like a lot of people at the start of the year, we were getting a little nervous about what Sitecore was doing in response to Optimisation and what Episerver were doing and Adobe, and then come end of January, it was fantastic to see the investment and then the new product launches, Boxever 451, etc., which we're going to hear a little bit about tonight, because I think a couple of the talks branch into those areas, so I'm really excited about that. In terms of the speakers, first up we have got Natalie and Peter, both from Sagittarius, talking about GraphQL for Sitecore, and they will be tapping into Content Hub and 451, which is really exciting. Then we've got Nikolay, Mitikov, Sitecore MVP, talking about performance investigations and what not to do to make the Sitecore site run fast. And then showing a few ideas about what you can do. And then finally, we've got Peter Prochazka, Sitecore MVP and architect from Accenture, talking about Sitecore JSS. And I'm excited about this because it sounds like this is a bit of a guide for back-end developers like me as an old school dev, and how we have to work with JSS and stuff, which I think is quite an interesting topic, one that I'm sure we can easily get tripped up by. And then finally, we've got Johannes' quiz, which I've been told is not too challenging. And I did get a sample question, which I got right, I was pleased to say. So looking forward to that at the end. And we're going to aim to finish about 6:40, so about an hour and a half from now. So with that, I think it's probably just time to hand straight over to Natalie and Peter and their talk about GraphQL for Sitecore. And I will play whack-a-mole with people who are making too much noise.
Yeah, somebody's...
Alex, I think
it's you, my bro.
Me?
You get a lot of feedback.
Ah, that is unprofessional.
That's better.
Had the wrong mic selected. Oh, how embarrassing. There we go.
Right, I'm going to share and hopefully you can all see my screen with Sagittarius on it.
Yep, we can.
Perfect. And now the lovely green screen. Yep.
Yep, still.
Perfect. Cool. All right then. So we're going to talk about GraphQL for Sitecore today. So just going to introduce myself. So hello, I'm Natalie, Head of Digital Experience at Sagittarius, and I'm a Sitecore Strategy MVP, focused on enabling clients to leverage the Sitecore Experience platform and the wider Sitecore ecosystem to meet business needs and customers' needs. And with me is the man that makes my marketing dreams come true of Sitecore, the Clyde to my Bonnie, the Yang to my Yin, and the Tech to my Ma. It's Mr. Peter Clisby.
Thanks very much, Nat. And I'm Head of Sitecore Engineering at Sagittarius.
Swift. Okay, and this evening we'll be discussing GraphQL for Sitecore. I'll be kicking off with an intro to set the scene. Peter will deliver the juicy bit in the middle, and I'll conclude. So really, we'll be serving you with a Waite Clisby sandwich. You know, what more could you want? Be hoping for on a Thursday night Zoom session.
Thanks again for that, Nat.
There's his little face. Okay, so in March, Peter and I presented at SUG and we discussed Content Hub, during which we touched on the use case for GraphQL to support headless delivery of content by way of the Experience Edge, acting as the GraphQL endpoint to pull content and expose it to the desired channel to support with solving the content crisis. And naturally, as we see the Sitecore ecosystem evolve, it becomes an even more useful tool, as many of the latest Sitecore integrations have GraphQL endpoints to consume content. And therefore, from a marketing perspective, our headless horizons widen and scalable, consistent and efficient content updates and dissemination across multiple channels become more real and more prevalent. But that's not to say that it's a new tech, it's not new in the tech arena, having been usable since version 9, and it has been the beneficiary of a few high profile talks such as SUGCOM, but it's particularly interesting now as we consider the strategic acquisitions from Sitecore and the changing landscape for marketers and their associated demands, including the consumption of commerce data and timely and efficient dissemination of pricing and so on that you can get with GraphQL from 451. So why GraphQL? As a query language for your API, GraphQL offers a number of benefits for both development teams and ultimately the consumer of the content. The GraphQL protocol is oriented around the needs of the front ends, so whether that's the web app or mobile app, etc. It efficiently returns only the requested data from a query and therefore saves bandwidth and improves performance by eliminating that data overfetching. It offers advanced features like query batching and automatic persistent queries to reduce bandwidth even further. Its built-in schema introspection drives amazing GUI query authoring tools, self-documentation, static analysis, and API mocking capabilities. And therefore, from a marketer's perspective, immediately there's an interface that enables them or us to become familiar with a data structure similar to Swagger page on a REST API. GraphQL queries the graph traversal, which enables incredibly expressive queries that would take many requests if done through a REST API. And as we kind of touched on with the Content Hub reference, the GraphQL community is large and vibrant with a whole galaxy of useful tools already available. And I'm now going to pass over to Peter, and he'll show you a brief demo of GraphQL endpoint consuming data from 451.
So, Nat, I'm so sorry about that. I cut my internet cut out there. So I take it we're at my part, are we?
We're on you, man. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, really sorry about that. So you can see here, Nat's stopped me from doing a live demo. You can see the 451 documentation there, and it's got the API reference where you can kind of see all the objects that are available in Order Cloud. It's also really good to see that 451's got a very active community. You can see here an application built around 451. I believe it's an Angular app, and there's another Head Start Angular app on another repository. So you can also see here the Order Cloud SDK for .NET, which is effectively a C# repository for strongly typed wrappers around the endpoints to remove any kind of manual error in calling the endpoints. And then again, the storefront, which is the Angular application that I mentioned before. And then you can see here, as part of the Mac Alliance, they've, as part of the Macathon, they've created a GraphQL API around Order Cloud 451. And you can see on the screen where I've claimed that repo. And it is as simple as plugging in your connection strings for Order Cloud, and then running npm install, npm start, and that should run up an application that is augmenting content from Order Cloud alongside CMS data. And so, as well as this interface here. So in the demo in just a second, you should see where I'm calling products from our order cloud instance. So you can see on the left-hand side that I'm getting products, and I'm getting the product name, product description, and the price. And so you can see on the left-hand side where I've removed price, just to show what comes back. So on the right, you can see the products in our 451 account being the bar towels, pack of 9, and then description being pack of 9 premium bar towels. And then on the left-hand side, you can see how with GraphQL, we get IntelliSense on what's available, and what I believe Nat said earlier when I cut out about the introspective schema, so that it gives you, as part of the UI, the schema of what's available to call. So you can see there where, as well as with a product, as well as price and description, I can get images, the ID, and a few other things. So something that's very good for GraphQL is Apollo Studio. And so you can see this here is the same data, just with a different UI, and potentially more rich UI with more features. But that's something I very much recommend exploring. And as I say, with the Makin repo, credit to them, it's very easy to get up and running and start getting familiar with Order Cloud and what's available. So that's been really good to see. So I'll pass back to Natalie.
Cool, thank you. So Peter, you've explained in previous sessions that JSS has the layout service. But in a multi-tenant scenario, how can you consume data from another tenant or globally shared content outside of the site node? I understand that GraphQL provides a way to achieve this, and that you'll now demo that for us by configuring GraphQL for Sitecore, and then do a demo on consuming the data within Sitecore.
And that's right. Before you go on to the demo, please, Nat. So something that I look at a lot of these new tools, whether it's Content Hub with Experience Edge, 451, and it's easy as a traditional Sitecore developer to be intimidated by these kind of new skill sets that you need to acquire. But something that is the case with GraphQL and Sitecore is it's been available, I think you mentioned this previously, Nat, with in Sitecore since 9.2. And so from my perspective, getting familiar with GraphQL in Sitecore, which is a familiar landscape, has helped me a lot to then build up that skill set for sort of transferring those skills to Content Hub with Experience Edge, and then 451 and the other products. So if you would move on to the demo, please, Nat. Lovely. So this is in fact another, this is the Head Start app for Order Cloud, and I missed it from the previous video, but you'll see here it's got integrations with various things. It's got a middleware layer, a layer for buyers, layer for sellers. It's then also got integrations with tools like Zoho, SendGrid, various other things. But again, it's a community-driven project. You can get up and running quickly. You can see here the config in Sitecore, moving on to Sitecore. In the app config Sitecore folder, if you've installed JSS, you should see the services GraphQL folder, which contains these GraphQL configuration files. So I'm going to just show a couple of important ones. They're documented very well, so you can see a lot of the comments in the XML, which kind of shows you what's available. So you can see on the right-hand side there, I'm configuring the master API. I'm highlighting their system content, which on the left-hand side, you can see the system content node. And within that, I'm configuring what templates are going to be available via GraphQL. So it's effectively a way of limiting what's available. So you can see the out-of-the-box one is just including all Sitecore templates. There's also the security configuration. You can see there I've got the public service, but there's also the private service. The public service needs the same API key that you'd get with the JSS layout service. The private version needs a logged in user. So you can see here where previously it was using system content, I'm using my own custom version in a patch file. And so I've got my mobile API there. that I've created, and then I'm referencing my own tug demo content, where instead of configuring my Sitecore templates, I believe I'm just going to include 2 templates, one being the standard template, just so I've got standard fields, and then also including a feature interface template of my FAQ template. So I'll show that in the GUI that you can see how that's consumed. So this is in Sitecore, my API key. Anyone familiar with JSS may be familiar with that. So I'm going to use the API key in the request. And then in the left section of the GUI, you can see I'm referencing an item. It's Sitecore Content Global FAQs. So on that item, I'm getting the name field, and then I'm also getting children. So within the children, you can see their fields. If you're not sure what fields are available, you can just type in fields with name and value, and you can see on the right-hand side there, that's given me all the fields that are available. You can see there's a question field and an answer field, and then everything else are the Sitecore standard template fields. So obviously, I'm only interested in question and answer. So if you know the template you're going to be consuming, you can see the ellipse on the left-hand side where I'm 3 dots and then on, and then it's showing the IntelliSense. You can see I've got my FAQ template available there. And then on the FAQ template, I know that there is question. You can see the IntelliSense again. And all I want from that field is the value. And then obviously I've got the answer field as well. So if I type A, you should see the IntelliSense kick in, and I've got the answer field, which again, I just want the value from. So if I run that query, you should see those values come back. So I'm going to run that query now, and you can see on the right-hand side here where I've got the FAQ item, the name of that item, and then the children with those fields, question, answer, coming back from my FAQ, my FAQs. So that kind of facilitates getting content in a headless scenario. The layout service obviously provides data for almost page items within the site context, but if I need to get items out of the site context, this facilitates it. And in the similar way here, where I'm getting the values of text fields, if you've got a multi-list field, you're able to get the value of the items in the multi-list field or the drop link field by using either target item in the case of the drop link field, or target items in the case of a multi-list field, and then you're able to do the same syntax to query the fields that are available on those items. So hopefully that kind of shows how, as I say, in a headless situation and a multi-tenant situation, if you've got shared content that is outside of the site context, you can use GraphQL to access that content. And you can see on the left-hand side, the syntax you'd use of target item, target items. There's not actually a field that's a drop link item. So I'll pass back to Natalie.
Thank you, Peter. So we've been using GraphQL internally to share relevant content to a client's app from Sitecore items, as Peter's demonstrated. We previously discussed its use with Content Hub, and today we've also touched on its use with 451. And so to conclude then, building a GraphQL API is an excellent investment for any site that will make heavy use of its APIs from its front ends, or expose its API to external consumers. So as this Sitecore ecosystem expands, and with a headless intention, this becomes even more powerful and prevalent for the wider Sitecore community. So until we can see you all again and share a beer with you, that's thank you from myself and from Peter. Any questions, please direct them to Peter.
Thanks, Nat. Thanks, Peter. It's almost like that was scripted, but it's very fluid. I think we're doing questions at the end. Is that right, Alex?
I did say, like, I've put into the chat if anyone wants to put forward a question, they can. We haven't had any so far, but
I got a question.
Oh, Jason's got a question. Go ahead, Jason. You may as well just ask. Yeah, straight away.
So with GraphQL, why would you use GraphQL instead of, because I think with GraphQL you're opening it up a little bit to any kind of queries. And I worked on a previous client site, and we kind of needed a bit more control because people could be running queries and putting back different things, and it wouldn't really. I didn't feel that it could scale. Whereas if I built like a fixed endpoint, I could control it a little bit more. So just create like an MVC controller.
Yeah, and no, it's a valid point, Jason. I mean, the one thing with GraphQL is you can bring back data because of the nature of the queries. You can bring back data that potentially might have needed multiple queries, or bringing back data that's unnecessary, almost redundant data. So that's one reason. It's also very user-friendly from a sort of consumer of an API, similar to kind of a Swagger Swagger interface, except you've actually got a lot more means of exploring that schema, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, so you can kind of shape it, I suppose, with what you actually want, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so in that way, I do believe it scales from a perspective of bringing back exactly what you want, and potentially performing one query where you might have needed multiple other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's cool. That's fine.
I've got a question, Peter, actually.
Go on, Nick.
From a sort of defensive coding perspective, when you've got kind of fluid schemas like through GraphQL where you can query children and just get a range of things back, how do you protect against people changing things in the back end? So changing the nature of a drop down to be a multi-select or something like that. Are there anything you can do to protect against that in terms of your architecture implementation?
Well, I suppose in the context of Sitecore, it's always going to be difficult to stop people from changing the items. But obviously, if they're templates, there'd be items that are controlled by developers anyway. So that would they would be updated by design. But I think it also leads into a point, Nick, about potentially people bringing back queries that are not performant and putting a strain on the system. And a way you can potentially restrict that is by what I showed with the config, where you're only allowing certain templates to be brought back, and then it feeds in nicely with Helix potentially, where you've got the interface templates, where you can get an individual feature template and only bring back the data that you want. So I think there is a danger there. But it's potentially unavoidable with the changing, but developers would just need to be mindful of that, I think.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, Peter.
Do you mind if I add a couple of things to that?
No, of course not. Please do.
So
Hopefully
I'm a huge fan of GraphQL, so I wanted to just, I'm sorry if I missed talking about it. There are two things. One is a whitelist, so you can whitelist all of your queries. It's a bit of extra work, but it completely locks down your API. And the API key is also it configures who the user is, who it's running and retrieving the data as. So if you wanted to really lock it down using Sitecore's built-in API, you can run it under, by default it's extranet anonymous, but you can make it a different user and you can use built-in security to configure exactly what that user can do. So
yeah, that's a really good shout, Steve. And that's point one.
No, that was it. That was me saying thanks.
No, that's a really good point though, Steve. And with the, like you said, with the API key, you can lock that down to cause origins and various other things too.
Good stuff. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Peter. Any other questions, anyone? No? All right. Next up then we have Nikolay, or Nick, I think is his name. Over to you, Nick.
Thanks for having me today. Thanks for a wonderful talk about GraphQL. And I would like to give another talk on the performance. And I think we'll be even touching some of the performance questions that were asked during the GraphQL one. So do you see the screen that I'm sharing? I'll be using slides, and they're going to be back like 160 slides for today, but we're going to make it faster, right? So my name is Nick. I hope you see that I'm a big fan of word art. I think it's a big mistake, nobody uses it. And I've just stolen the logo from the previous presenter, thanks. So since my Twitter account has less than 100 followers, it feels right to introduce myself. I am the owner of Making It Faster. I am a performance detective chasing performance crimes for like 7 years and blog about that. So it's almost Friday today, and what are we going to be talking like Thursday evening, almost Friday, yeah. So frameworks evolve, code-based changes, technologies are born and decay. However, the foundational ideas remain the same. We'll have an easygoing talk on principles rather than implementation ideas. There are going to be slides and there are going to be QR codes that you could follow later on the recorded version. And the question to get started is simple. Should programs be fast or no? Like, since you have already invited me and you are like development community, I think I shouldn't be spending too much time saying to you that stability issues can be a pain in the ass. Like, they can cost lots of money. For Amazon, it was like a lot of, like almost 3 million. The slower side is the less conversion, and what feels to be just natural was proven by Google machine learning study when they predicted that bounce rates are higher and less conversion, like whatever. And the slower sites will attract less traffic because Google would bring core vitals into performance and into search ranking. But like, if we are mostly developers, we care about real life examples. And I would ask you to take a moment to think anything that you have faced recently, any slow operation, what could it be, right? It's just to have it in mind. It could be login to banking account, or my example would be is waiting for Sitecore to restart after I put a new assembly in there. Okay, so how many spent in your case? How many seconds spent? Like, for me, it would be 1 minute, saying 20 times a day I recompile stuff. So I wait 20 minutes a day just to wait for Sitecore to start. And would say that like 4K people are Sitecore developers. And if we try to multiply all the numbers, we'll get something like 80, whatever, a lot of minutes a day, but that doesn't resonate. And if we convert that into the days, that would be 55 days. So slow operations take the most expensive resources you and I have in common. And if so, how can we make software faster? By now, we should have concluded that we at least desire our software to be fast. How to make it faster? The first step, logically, would be to know where it slows down. And we'll be discussing how to figure out why our code base is slow. What is that about? And assuming there is a mechanism to figure out like what does each thread do every millisecond, we can figure out the slow place. How can we actually be sure that our version would be faster, right? Assuming there is a tool that can be super accurate and tell us faster, slower, how can we understand it? It's really faster. Why? Assuming there is a tool for checking how inner hardware is used, how or what can we do if it's like the framework, if it's Sitecore or Swagger or whatever, if it's not in our code base, just we use it. Assuming there is a notepad that can edit text files, and it can do that because it knows that there's characters encoding and whatever. And logically, assembly, very similar. It has IL code in it. Therefore, assuming there is a tool that can help us to modify IL code, we're going to be looking at other tools as well. Just to recap, I've asked you to define a performance problem to solve. Just take a moment to refresh it in your memory. What would that be? So for me, it was slow Sitecore stuff. And the question has to be asked, how to make it faster? Here is a list of things people normally do if they want faster stuff. They can bring in more servers. They can put a bigger CPU cooling system, storage, more servers, caching layer, put servers closer, install updates, or send apologies like That's what it does. We can switch from SQL to Mongo, from Mongo to SQL. We can add indexes, we can remove indexes, we can use Sol or whatever. Take a moment and think about what could be suitable to solve your problem that you are thinking of. Even if your item is not in this list, still applies, right? We're just thinking about it. And now when we have the problem statement defined, we can talk through the techniques that are frequently used. My favorite one is random change. How it works, you take random configuration setting with a loud name, cache size, prefetch cache size, or item cache size, or access result cache size, and change it. Then you play it cool, saying that it worked, right? And you need to repeat it a few times. Confidence statement made by a professional spreads the confidence around. You're going to be wondering, how come it could work when nothing has changed? There is one guy, Daniel, he won a Nobel Prize in economy, and the idea is that he was finding bugs in human perception. And one of that is like, yeah, it might work. So guessing, nah. Another one quite popular these days, like blaming someone else. You are talking to a third-party system and you think, oh, wait, my code is good enough. That's the third-party system that is slow. And that team should look into that. And then the team does a performance investigation, tells that, no, our code is fast, and gives you some data. Then you jump to another team and so on, until someone actually solves the problem for you. Now, the last method that we're gonna be looking at today is streetlighting method. So there is a drunk guy stands to a next to car trying to find something. There is a street light. Another one approaches him asking like, what are you doing? He's like, I lost my car keys. Can you help me find them? They are looking for the car keys, but cannot find it. And after a while, the guy asks, are you sure you've lost them here? And the guy's like, nah, I lost them near the bar. But why are we looking here? Because the light is here. I think every developer in Sitecore has tried to solve the problem of slowness just looking at the Sitecore logs. It is believed that logs can answer any question, right? If you have a green dashboard, you have an advanced reporting tool that costs billions, like whatever. If all green, then there is no problem. Nope. So jokes aside, what is the right way to do it? We need to define problem statement. Think about your problem statement. Problem without clear definition cannot be clearly resolved. How does your problem statement looks like? Was it like slow login to bank or Waite Sitecore to start for ages, or something more quantitative? Whenever we do investigations, we have identified that random changes are not useful at all. At this point in time, we should have the problem statement, and there should be a hypothesis. What's happening? Hypothesis, example, caching layer is too small. Then our prediction, if we make it larger, then should be much faster. We make the test by like either testing it for real or recording the benchmark. And then we see, nope, the benchmark shows that the pile of time spent at cache scavenge, actually, because our cache is huge and it takes time to remove all the entries from that, and cache is blocked for the time. If we enable cache key indexing, then it's going to be faster. And then you repeat. But wait, how do you land with an initial hypothesis? You need to collect intel to see if you have a huge culprit list to narrow it down. And here we are at proper performance analysis methodologies. We're going to be discussing 3 of them. First one is use. Good start for almost every investigation. Arrives with a set of actions that you need to take, very similar to airplane emergency landing guide. For each resource in the system, it could be CPU, RAM, network. You check for how long the resource is used. Like, for example, CPU, 80% for last hour constantly or for last 10 seconds. 2 different stories. Saturation, was it 12% or 100%? Like 12%, if you have 8 cores, it would be roughly saying that 1 core does all the job while others are not doing anything, multi-threaded issue. And errors, you check errors, whatever they are, right? It could be any tool like application insights, task manager, whatever. The next one would be event tracing. System normally operate by processing events. And when we are looking at a picture, we tend to aggregate them together, like requests per second or so. However, the devil could be in the detail. It could be tiny bit. So it's important to have an ability to see what data is being processed at what point in time. And the last one for today would be latency analysis. And that is roughly how the request processing looks like. Here is the user, and there is a sequence of steps that are happening in between in order to process it. We're not thinking about them on daily basis, but that's real life. So latency analysis checks how much time does it take to complete the operation, and then we break it into smaller components. We subdivide the components with higher latency, and then we narrow down to exact place where it takes it all. The next one that I'd like to get your opinion on, like basically how to write fast code. So at this point in time, we know how not to do performance investigations, no random changes, a streetlight method, blaming people, like we have 3 methodologies. And assuming we can find the bottleneck, what does it take actually to be better than the guy that wrote the code that is slow? I would say that understanding ratio between operations is quite important. And let's play a simple quiz. How many CPU cycles can be done upon looking for a file in SSD? I will give you a hint. These are the ratios. However, it doesn't resonate in your mind, does it? And why so? Humans tend to have poor understanding of numbers they cannot scale. So if we say that one CPU cycle is 1 second, then solid state disk access would take from 9 hours to 90 hours. Or the network that just reaches beyond your server would take time. Next time you ask yourself, should I cache solve responses? The answer is, or like maybe it's a good idea to switch to microservice architecture because whatever. So you got the drill, right? The next question would be, what can be faster than spending a few CPU cycles? In that table, CPU cycle was considered to be the king, right? Not spending them. However, the most important part, according to John Bentley, the guy who made improvements to various computing algorithms, would be clean design and implementation, maintainable modularity. And doesn't seem that you're impressed. Let me explain. As system evolves, you'll get bottlenecks in different places. Here you get the road, there is a fallen tree. You remove the tree. Do you have 100% confidence level that this is the only tree fallen, that you will not get any on your road? So we'll need to change code, algorithms, databases, whatever. And the easier change can be implemented, the safer, the faster you move. This is a great movie, Ford versus Ferrari. Ken Miles, Christian Bale, he knows how to make car faster with every turn he makes, with every lap. There was a scene after the race when he almost won it, and he said that our car can do much better just a few moments after. Why? What? How? What could help us to make improvements in our code? So it could be dynamic profiling and resilience of different profilers out there. What we need is like no installation, easy to use, no overhead, and preferably be free. I have found one for you. This is the hand of the .NET creator, performance architect Vance Morrison. And on the video that I have stolen the frame from, he says that Purview is the best. You could reasonably argue that this is a random picture with random hand on it. How can I prove my statement? And here is the link. You can check it on your own. So let's figure out if Purview meets all the requirements. It runs on event tracing stuff. That is just whatever core can do. It emits events super fast. It can be turned on, turned off dynamically. And you can add our own events. And it can be enabled as easy as in 3 steps. First, we download the Purview from Microsoft. Second one, we put Purview to container, for example, or the server. We start the collection, and we're doing the performance profiler. Has anybody noticed something weird? That was a Docker Compose file. It doesn't have UI, so we cannot start Purview. And what we as a developer with tons of experience do, I hope that Google will save me. So yeah, Purview can be launched with command line args, and you just launch it. Yes, accept your license terms. Please show me what threads are doing. Log whatever you do. Do not rush to pack everything. Run for 80 seconds, and enable these providers, these private IDs. What are those IDs? You're gonna be wondering. The architecture of event tracing defines a set of providers that are already on that machine with Windows, with CLR, with whatever, like anyone can do them. And then you start the profiling session and you tell which providers should be enabled. You can see the list of providers installed by asking logman query providers. Wait a second. We just learned that event tracing is a Windows feature, and we're talking about Docker. This is how it looks in Docker. There's one Windows, but in like servers, whatever, you have 1, 2, 3 different operation system. What happens? How can it work? The important message is that it can starting from 2017. So sounds like Windows can do it. There is a command line arguments that can allow us to do it even in the containers. Let's try to do it. So whenever we try to do it in Docker, nothing happens. But the documentation states that it will seem to do nothing, but actually it was doing something, but you don't see it. Brilliant. And one of our requirements was that should be super easy to work with that. And Purview arrives with flame graphs. There is one rule to know: the wider bar, the more time is spent. And here how it looks like. So the wider bar, the more time is spent, and in here it's application start. And we can see that a big pile of time is spent in analytics core subsystem initialization. But before getting to this view, we need to know the controls, because whenever you open it, you land somewhere like here. So first of all, let's include only Sitecore stuff. Better. My example was, I think, application start. Only application start. Boom. I don't want to see them tiny bits. I'd like to see picture in full. Please collapse everything or fold everything that is less than 4%. Boom, and we're in this view. And it's too much. I want to have it simplified. I'd like to hide the wrapper calls, such as dynamic class core pipeline. Take a moment to recall the problem you were trying to solve just now. Could you actually think that it could be login, log.info or log.debug, taking almost half of the time for your customer serve, whatever? Returning back to the slide. How do you know what wrappers call, or what wrapper method, what methods is useful, what is not? Reverse engineering tools. We can see what is happening inside. We can get an assembly, put in here, see what it does. And in our case, core pipeline only invokes the processor that you have in config defined. You can ask what is code is obfuscated if somebody doesn't want us to look at the code. If there is a way to obfuscate, then logically there should be another way around, and there is a deobfuscator. As easy to use a drag and drop assembly, and here we go. Disclaimer, you could use that only for educational investigation purposes. Like a year ago, I've experienced an issue that was solely provoked by obfuscation. There was no thread safe hash table added on top. So when we tried to take a look at the memory snapshot, there was a hash table, but in the source code, there was no hash table. And then we narrowed down. Saying we found long running method, what's next? If only we could get the same data set that method operates with, and we could prove that our code would run better with that exact data. As if we could take the data from live application, like whatever is in cache, move it there, get version A, get version B, and tell what's faster. And here where we're gonna be discussing memory dumps. On your left, you can see real world picture. On your right, you can see application picture. Or wait, the other way around. They look so familiar because it's just an array of bytes at the end of the day. It's a matter of having the right software to open it. In picture, you would see normally like trees, human, birds, maybe the information when it was taken. Maybe if you spot the tree leaves are bending, then there is a wind. However, you don't know how strong wind, you can just guess. If somebody wearing jogging outfit, most likely they are running. But you cannot say for how long they are running and that kind of stuff. Similarly, application would show you all objects, timestamps, what does each thread do, but it would not tell you how long it does that stuff. It's very easy to collect, just details, application, right click, dump file. In Azure, you can do it from Kudu or whatever, in just a few clicks. And here is how it looks like. We can see what are our objects. You can reasonably argue that we are interested in specific point in time and billions of operations are happening. How can we collect it in right point in time? If only there was a way to tell that there is an exceptional situation in which I am interested in and I'd like to have the memory snapshot collected at that point in time. And there is a command line for that, proc dump, that allows us to specify the exception to fish for. Whenever this exception is raised in the code, we will collect the memory snapshot, but there is no exception. We could raise one, right? Simple. But it is in third-party framework that I have no code base. I had like no idea what's happening inside. I can edit assemblies, similarly as Notepad can edit text files. And looking at here, it's IL code, and I can create new instruction, whatever I want. Am I supposed to do it by hand? Nope. You can compile an assembly, see the IL code, and transfer it to whatever you like. Okay, assuming at this point in time, we have the mechanism to collect the right data at the right point in time. Cool. How am I supposed to extract all of them? There is a zillions. Do we want me to open it in editor and Control-C, Control-V to code? Nope. There is a Microsoft Diagnostic Runtime Assembly Cell RMD that allows us to write C# code to fetch the data. On your left, you see how the access result cache key looks like. On your right, you can see the code that loads it from memory snapshot and tries to save everything to JSON file. What if I need data stream in time? The previous session was discussing the GraphQL queries, and I think it's possible that somebody tries to create a super complex query, and we'd like to know what query takes a lot of time. We'd like to have a possibility to enable that and disable that in point in time. We don't want to log the data every time anybody asks GraphQL. Good point is that Microsoft has produced trace event library that serves its purpose. It allows us to define our own event source, similarly as CLR has, Windows has, like drivers can have, whatever. So you define it, and here is how you use it. You simply call log.event with the parameters that you want. Then when you launch the collection, you specify the provider that you're interested in. In here, this is the name of my provider on this slide. And I can see the data in Purview with the parameters nocat here. How can I aggregate the data? I don't want to do Control-C, Control-V from there. I'm a developer. I'd like to develop the right code. Yeah, this is how you can do it. You can write C# code. And it looks like there is a naming convention by hand. And if I make a mistake, everything crashes. There is a better way. If you are looking at the direction, there is an auto generation that can give you the code. So it becomes as easy as that. A lot of text in here. It says that what we did just now was we created an event, and in that event, it had some data, whatever. In simple words, we want to know the information that is in the purview, and we'd like to create the provider for that, even though it's already in the system. We can generate the manifest for the provider that exists in the system and write C# code to parse it. So no need to use login for log debug to record parameters. Okay, what am I supposed to do with the data? I have the right data collected at the right point in time, and I'd like to know if my variation works better. Micro benchmarking. There is a library, benchmark.net, that allows us to write code like that. Variation A, variation B. How faster is that? And here you get the results. It takes care about the statistics. You need repeatable results. If like your machine in the background load in Visual Studio and the whole CPU power is stolen, it would likely detect it and it would not give you the result until the certain level of statistical confidence is met. Simple, most simple benchmark can look like that if you are writing code and you are wondering which version is faster in this concrete scenario. Right. Next one would be, how would I see that my version is faster? And tools for that. Real life example. One is Sitecore days counter, and the other one is better counter. It has an operation that all it does initializes it. One version takes 6 seconds. Why? Because it uses microarchitecture only for 14%. And all the operations are memory bound. There is the read that should be synchronized across all the cores. Another version, much faster. So the performance would be like a chain, as strong as weakest links. And if only I could to choose one line for the presentation, it would be not jump into conclusions without technical facts. Cool.
Good stuff. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, folks. I'm ready for the questions.
We've got a couple of minutes for questions, and then we might have a bit more time at the end. Any questions for Nick at this stage?
I've got a...
mute. Oh, go on.
Go on, no, you go first.
Oh, okay, sorry, well, having managed to unmute myself. So I know from experience that there's quite a lot of stuff in finding performance issues in sites I've worked on, where actually what you're looking for is when it's not really doing anything. The waiting time for, I've thrown something off into the cloud and now the code is sitting here doing nothing for, you know, what in computer terms is a long time. Have you got any good patterns for, or automation processes for spotting places where the code's just sitting, spinning, waiting for something?
Yes, the Purview tool would do that. As I've mentioned, it runs on the providers that are already in there. And luckily enough, CLR arrives with a series of providers. It can instruct every thread to tell you what it does every millisecond. First. Second one, there is a TPL library that allows you to catch tasks jumping from one thread to another one. So it gives you a good picture what is happening inside the process out of the box. You don't need to install anything. Like, you just need to download Purview, or if we're talking about web apps, it's already in there. And then when you notice something is happening like what you don't like, you can collect the profile yourself, or you can script it, because there is a way how to, basically you just need to invoke some program with some command line arguments and run it for a certain amount of seconds. Then it will give you the profile, and the profile is usually for humans to look at. And then you'll spot if it's interesting for you. So basically it could be scripted. And in my experience, the Bigger problem is when everything is slow and like it's there.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Nick. Peter, do you have one quick question?
Yeah, mine is a quick question. So I don't know if anyone's seen it, but Charles Toronto did a talk at SUGCon once about their Hedgehog's tool Zero Deploy, which was aimed at Sitecore startup. And I believe the concept was something along the lines of registering the DLLs in the CMS. So and it somehow extremely impacted startup time. But your analytics seem to indicate that logging was potentially a large part of that. Is that, did I read that correctly, or?
That was just a sample illustration for the purpose of demo. I think that for every solution, it could be different. If we're talking about the Sitecore stock out of the box, the big pile of initial startup time is taken by compilation, when you need to compile such stuff as a browser, app globals, or whatever. So the compilation time depends on the amount of assemblies you haven't been. Basically, the purview would show you that as well. You will see logs that the compilation log is taken, and it also will show you how much time it takes for assembly to get loaded. So the purview would answer that question. And the slides that I've shared, the log part is simply for illustration purposes, because I have not seen a single developer that would keep in mind that the performance issue could be caused by log.info.
Cool. Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Thank you, Nick, for that. And obviously, it's a really core topic at the moment with Google Core Vitals update coming out thick and fast. We know that's been impacting a lot of our team and clients, and obviously all the stuff that's been happening in the news with Fastly and their outages. So really key topic. Hopefully we'll get time for some questions after that. But for now, to keep things moving, I'm going to hand over to Peter, his talk from hero to zero and back to hero, the journey of a back-end dev going into the weird and wonderful world, well, front-end world via React by the sounds of it. So over to you, Peter.
Thanks, Nick. So let me share my screen. Hopefully you can see it.
We can.
Yep, awesome. Let me also share the presentation. So, hi everyone, thanks for having me. I'm really happy that I can talk today about my recent experience from switching between the backend or from backend developer to front end, hence the title. So first I felt like, I'm a really strong backend developer, but then when I started, I was really like having a hard time with the front end, but at the end, I would say it was really like a nice fun ride, and I felt like I know something about JSS, React, some front end stuff, JavaScript, and so forth. So let's have a quick intro. So just to let you know what I'm up to, or what I was up to. So I work for Accenture for almost 10 years now. I have 7 years of experience with Sitecore. I did Sitecore ASP.NET MVC, SXA projects, also some Sitecore commerce. I have background with ASP.NET Web Forms, MVC, ASP Classic, PHP, and all of those languages and these things, more or less backend. So really, I would feel I'm always thinking about myself as a hardcore backend developer. And the project that I will talk today about really made me switch to the dark side, as you would thought about. So let's take a look for some brief description. What was the initial, let's say, start of the project, or what it should be. So it should be a brownfield project. More or less, there were some existing Sitecore sites on-prem. There was one built with ASP.NET MVC 5 years ago with Angular. Second one with, again, ASP.NET MVC, Vue.js, built last year. They were calling it Platform 1.0. More or less, our project was Platform 1.1. So as you could imagine, we more or less should use just the Platform 1.0, make a bit nicer, refactor it a bit, and create a completely new public-facing website for the client. More or less, the old platform was built on top of Sitecore 8. The new one that we supposed to modernize should be built on Sitecore 9.3. Also, we should move from on-prem to Azure. So yeah, we started with Sprint O. Even though I hate this name, but we usually call this as some kind of prepping up sprint, where all the, it's like a magical sprint where all the onboarding is happening, some rough architecture is designed and settled, and we are starting to design the components and so forth. But then in the middle of this sprint, somebody came that, yeah, maybe the platform 1.1 is not something that we will just continue with platform 1.0, but we should use JSS. So I was a bit first anxious, waiting for the final decision, but at the end, I would say that, yeah, it was a really good opportunity for us to try new things. So as a Sitecore MVC, working with the ASP.NET MVC and Sitecore for lots of years, we are turning to JSS, so a bit new experience for me. So at first we had to settle basically what kind of framework we should use, or UI library. So it was already on the project Angular, also Vue.js, but we have chosen React. Basically, a majority of the team already had past experience with React. Also, we were thinking about that, or I already heard some rumors that Sitecore 10.1 will support Next.js, so a framework built on top of React. So I was thinking like maybe React is, let's say, future-proof one. So let's give it a go. Also, some internal report of our company that we have received was telling that more or less the React and Vue.js are the future frameworks. So we were picking between these two. So React won. Then the first two sprints were, I don't know why, but they somehow magically always ended, right? Even though that we had some hiccups, we were able to deliver all the components, layouts. At the end we had successful demo, but I somehow had some gut feelings that the things that we are doing or delivering is not something that we're supposed to continue. We have also realized that I have realized that we have a problem on UI side, that basically that the designs were not prepared upfront, but they were still like done during the sprints. So there was a lot of rework. Also, the sketch-wise were not like pixel perfect. So that's why more or less the front-end team was always recreating components, pages, and because there were some paddings instead of 24 pixels, something had 25. So they thought like, yeah, it's good to create a completely new component or page, not to reuse everything before. So I somehow stepped in and I said like, hey, we need to do something else because this is not something that we can more or less continue working with. So once more or less the DevOps and the backend part of the project was working and was in good shape, I turned into front end. And actually I used the very same words from Dark Knight, that yeah, I'm not the hero that they deserve, but the hero they need. So I stepped in as a UI lead. So basically I started to do the UI reviews in Azure DevOps, even though that I had no idea what the code looks like in JavaScript and React, but I was more or less trying to change first the processes. But yeah, maybe this is more accurate, I would say. But yeah, this is how my journey of becoming UI lead or React developer started. So slowly first managing front-end team, reviewing the pull requests, and then more and more involved in the development. So from Sprint 4 and onwards, we made a couple of changes in the front end. So first, we have settled the design system. As I mentioned before, it was more like everybody was doing their own. Nobody was thinking about the reusing stuff. So we have picked Atomic Design because I already used it on my previous projects. And more or less, it was really like also funny to talk about atoms, molecules, what kind of elements on the page we can reuse or from components. So we have started to create atoms. Also, then we were settling from them molecules. Basically, the organisms were the JSS components at the end. If you are interested, there is a really good book about atomic design by Brett Frost. So I highly recommend reading it. If you are also trying to embrace JSS, then definitely HTML5 is the must-have, I would say. So even though, like, if you, as a backend developer, usually you are also working with HTML and so forth. But if you really want to embrace React and JavaScript and more or less the whole ecosystem regarding Sitecore JSS, then definitely HTML5 is a must. And CSS3 or more or less CSS with CSS grids and flexboxes and all of those things, it's something nice to know. Let's take a look on the JavaScript part, because yeah, I wrote like JavaScript 15 years ago, and from that time just C#, ASP.NET, PowerShells, and all of those languages I was using. So JavaScript was not my favorite, but yeah, I remember that it's not a simple language. It's a bit of confusing one. Yeah, for recruiters, JavaScript is not Java. Definitely, even though that the word Java is there, they are completely different languages. Definitely, JavaScript is not type safe as Java or C#. I also remember that back then, lots of years ago, when you were using JavaScript, it was more like you were using vanilla JavaScript or jQuery, maybe XJS. But like recently, a couple of years ago, it's like a boom of all of the UI libraries or frameworks, Angular, React, Vue.js. You can use TypeScript, Gatsby, Next.js, Node. Yeah, there are lots of libraries, so it's a big landscape. Also, yeah, as you probably know, lots of front-end developers, if they see new library, they want to immediately play with it, try it out, right? But yeah, don't be fooled. JavaScript is everywhere. It's not anymore just language that is used and interpreted by browsers, but it's really like it's used on servers. Even the Azure functions, you can pick one of the languages is JavaScript, so you can write also Azure functions, server function as a service if you wish. So really JavaScript is everywhere. But yeah, those nuances and syntax of JavaScript is really confusing sometimes. So for example, if you are summing numbers, right? 1 plus 2 is 3, 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6, and so forth until 5, it's 15. But if you add also 6 as a string, then probably you would expect that the result is 21. But yeah, of course, it's 156 because the strings are concatenated at the end. But if you are changing the order from other languages, you would maybe expect that the result will be 615, right? Yeah, like this one, but not in JavaScript. If you are starting with string, then all of those numbers are also concatenated as strings. So yeah, this is the outcome of when you are summing this. Also, when you are subtracting things, like 2 plus 2 is 4, 2 plus 2 as a string is concatenated, so it's 22, of course. But when you are subtracting 2 plus 2 minus 2 is 2, of course, also from the other languages. But if you are using strings, then 2 plus 2 minus 2 as strings is 20. And why is that? Because 2 plus 2, it's concatenated as strings, so 22. But then minus 2, again, we have numbers, so let's subtract. So yeah, answer is 20. Also, the equality operators, that's something that you need to keep in mind, that if you are just using 2 of them, it's not checking type. So 2 as a string and 2 as a number, it will give you true. But if you are using 3 or the strict equality comparison operator, what's its name? It's also checking the type. Also the date things, like if you are instantiating new date, like this one, the 24th of December, 2019, if you are calling the out of the box JavaScript or the function get full year, you will receive 2019, which is, I would say, expected. But when you are calling get month, you will get 11, and then it's like a bummer. Like, what? Why 11? Because of course get month is returning numbers as index, and it's starting from 0. So January 0, February 1. So 11 is December. But then the WTF moment is with the get day. When you call it, you will get 2. So when you are asking like why, I would expect maybe 23, right? If the logic is the same as with the get month, but the get day is not returning you the index of the day of the month, but in the index of the day of the week, right? So again, 0 is Sunday, Monday is 1, so 2 is Tuesday. So yeah, that's why you will get 2. So all of these things, all of these JavaScript nuances you can solve by NPM packages. There are like date FNS or moment.js that you can use. So definitely those are helpful. You have even NPM package for checking whether the number is odd, right? So instead of writing this simple JavaScript syntax, you can just download the NPM package, is odd, and it will check. You can call the function and it will check whether the number is odd. But yeah, like for everything, there is also a second NPM package is even. So you don't need to use the exclamation mark to divert the checking whether something is odd. You can even download another NPM package and check whether that's the case. So yeah, but jokes aside, to embrace JavaScript, you need to know a couple of things like date types, variables, loops, global local scope. You also need to check some array methods like map, reduce, for each, the promises and async programming, and definitely the fetch API if you want to call some external APIs. There are also things like closure, hoisting, that the null is also an object in JavaScript, who would guess. Also the NaN, which means not a number, is also a number at the end, which nobody would guess. So if you understand this, then you are really a good JavaScript programmer. But I think you will just get to know it once you start building some solutions with JSS. Also make sure that you understand what is the more or less the linkage between the JavaScript and the ECMAScript. That is more or less like the only implementation currently of the ECMAScript. There are also each year there is a new version of ECMAScript which brings new and new functionalities and implementations to JavaScript itself also, which then you can use. So now you have also let and const keywords, you have classes, you have arrow functions, which make code much simpler. So definitely check these. If you are uncertain or you would like to check or you would like to learn JavaScript, definitely check these books. I'm really fond of the Succinctly series by Syncfusion. You can just download their free ebooks. It's like 100 pages around each of them, the first two. And you can just quickly grasp some new tech that you would like to check. Also, there are some trainings. I highly recommend these ones by Vespos to check, and you have the link on the bottom. If you want to start with Sitecore JSS, one of the languages that you can pick is React. We have picked React. One of the things that you need to understand is that it's completely different kind of thinking and also programming. You are changing the programming paradigm that you are using instead of the imperative one in C# where you need to write everything. Like you can see here, like go to kitchen, open the fridge, blah, 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 and so forth. In the declarative one, you just say what you want at the end. Like I want a dinner with chicken. How it looks like, it's something like this. So on the left side, you have the imperative one. On the right side, you have the declarative where you are using the map function. So instead of really writing the full for each loop, you just use the map function, which multiplies the number by 2, and that's it. So what I also liked about React is the virtual DOM. So instead of working with the real DOM, you use the virtual DOM, and more or less the React is calculating and doing the changes to the real DOM based on this, which is really making this much faster than. That's why React and these kind of libraries are much faster than jQuery, because there is no this kind of re-rendering of the DOM with each update, which was the issue with the jQuery and other libraries before. Also, what I liked with React is the JSX, which is really nice syntactic sugar, which I really quickly used to it. So make sure that you understand how you can combine the JavaScript with HTML and it really makes components much faster to read and also much faster to write at the end. Also make sure that you understand what are React hooks, state management, these kind of libraries, and so lots of things about React. Definitely read the documentation. There are lots of examples there, and I think this is one of the best documentation that I read. So definitely check it out. Also, these books, again, one from Succinctly, and the other one from Robin Vieruch, The Road to React, is a really nice one if you want to learn React. Also, trainings, one from the Best Boss that I mentioned before, or this one on Udacity, that was a really nice one because you have also the exercises there. So it's you are really forced to also code. It's not only that, hey, I just watch some videos and I know React. That's not the case. You also need to learn by doing, right? So yeah, practice, practice, and practice. So if you ask me if I know React, I'm not for sure. Definitely, I don't know it fully. I'm still in that kind of phase that I know the unknown. So I still need to learn. But yeah, it's great experience so far. So definitely worth it. So yeah, Sitecore JSS, the nicest one from these slides, I would say. So it's a set of npm packages that more or less enable you to work with Sitecore in more kind of headless fashion. It's like a modern word. So there are lots of npm packages that you will install and you can more or less use, and it will completely change how you work with Sitecore. So usually, with SXA or with the other modules of Sitecore, you have the ASP.NET, you have Sitecore as another framework, and then you have SXA or your own, like a company framework that you use. So more or less you do the request in browser, CMS finds the content, generates the HTML, and then the browser displays the HTML. In front-end world, it's a bit different. So more or less you have the vanilla JavaScript, you have React on top, and you have the Sitecore JSS, right? So in browser, you just made a request. On CMS, it just finds the content, it serves it as a JSON layout service, and then the browser renders the markup. So more or less, there is no server-side rendering if you are not using the integrated mode. So yeah, if you are using the connected or disconnected mode, then you are completely working just in the browser. Also this one, so more or less you have, if we compare it with SXA or with other frameworks, the JSS is the one that more or less you have the ASP.NET Sitecore, and then you have the layout service. You have a couple of modes or programming styles. You have the code first or Sitecore first. In our project, we were using code first because that's like, I would say that's a nice starter programming style with JSS, but definitely for production purposes, I would use Sitecore first. Check the documentation for more details about this. Also, you have lots of modes that you can use. Definitely for production, I would recommend using the connected mode on the CMS side, on the CD side, or API mode. On the CMS side, definitely the integrated mode, because it really nicely integrates also with Experience Editor. The API mode is usually used only for, when you are doing the React Native or more or less some kind of mobile native applications. What was also changed on our project and for me for tooling was that from Visual Studio, I switched to Visual Studio Code. It's not mandatory. Visual Studio Code, you can more or less use Notepad or Notepad++ or Atom or WebStorm or any other editor that you are used to. But with Visual Studio Code, I had really good experience. You can also install SLint or Prettier or other extensions that will simplify and more or less make the code similarly for also the other developers. So some practical gotchas from our project. So usually when you are creating new project, you are calling these 4 commands. So first install the npm packages, then create the project, cd to the folder, and then JSS start. More or less when you are working not with the latest version of Sitecore, you need to use a different command. So instead of the second one, JSS create my first app, blah, 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 you also need to use that parameter b release and then the version of the release that you are using, because if you are using it without, it will always install the latest Sitecore. So if you are on Sitecore 10.1 currently, you are good. But if you are on Sitecore 10 or Sitecore 9.3 or the older ones, you need to use this one with, of course, proper versioning. You can also check my blog post about this. Then regarding the development, so you are using two commands: deploy app, deploy items. Deploy app for to include also the content and dictionary, and the items if you are also using some other languages to the default English. You also need to use the deploy items. For the no environment specific configuration, there is no out of the box. There is no out of the box support for environment specific configuration. We have more or less found out that if we already have API, why not to somehow use the Sitecore rule-based configuration? So more or less we were, from the React application, we were calling our API to get the config elements from Sitecore. If you are interested, you can also check my blog post. I will share this after this meetup, so you can check the blog post, because we wanted to really follow the build once, deploy anywhere strategy. So we had to come up with some this kind of solution. If you are more or less starting with JSS, if you are wondering whether there is a documentation where it will ease it for you, then definitely check also this blog post that I created with lots of learning resources, lots of links to either the official, the unofficial JSS documentation, and also some other links to Stack Exchange or Slack or so. So at the end, our project, the final description, I would say that we built platform 1.1 using JSS, React on Sitecore 9.3. We were following atomic design. The next step that we would like to do are to upgrade to Sitecore 10.1, because it can also leverage the next.js, which supports the static set generation and also the TypeScript. And also we wanted to utilize the storybook, which is a really nice tool to document your components, elements, and so forth. Also from version Sitecore 9.2, JSS and SXA are modules that you can use together. If before that, it was really like you had to choose either to use SXA or JSS because they were not so compatible. Finally, Sitecore solved it. So yeah. With the JSS, you have lots of YAML files, so prepare for it. Yeah, they are everywhere. At the end of the project, I felt like Neo from Matrix, who could read the code. So I knew instantly in Azure DevOps during the PR reviews that what are some issues with YAML files. So to sum it up, don't be afraid to try new things, learn new languages or new programming paradigms. Sometimes you just need to compare what you already know with the nuances of the tech languages you are trying to embrace, and you are good to go. So yeah, it's all about your eagerness to learn new things. As my grandfather used to say, the more languages you know, the more of a person you are. I would maybe paraphrase it to the more languages you know, the more of a developer you are. So yeah, that's I wanted to say to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That's great. And good to know in the 15 years since I gave up development, JavaScript is still equally nuanced with some of those little features that it has. Any questions for Peter? If not, oh, Jason, go for it.
Yeah. Sorry, I had one. So was there a reason that you didn't use TypeScript and you went straight in with like React and JavaScript?
Yeah, it was already for us, you know, like JSS, React, and all of these things were new to us, and I didn't want it to, let's say, go
for another
direction. Yeah, so we were already stressed, let's say, JSS and React, and more or less only one guy knew TypeScript. So I felt like it's something maybe to use in a couple of weeks or months in phase 2, the magical phase 2. So
yeah. I was doing some React stuff with JSS before, and I found it easier with TypeScript than JavaScript. Yeah, JavaScript just blows my brain, but TypeScript sort of makes sense.
Yep, definitely.
Good stuff. Thanks, Jason. Anyone else? If not, I'm going to hand back to Johannes then, who has his quiz prepared.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. That was great.
Perfect.